Some of the smartest conversation I've ever heard, I heard in a very small house. No, it was quite a big house. It was near a very small town in the County Fermanagh, near Slay. It was in Eshnadarragh. My grandmother, Minnie Mcginnity, she used to have a lot of people in on their ceilidh in the evening. There was people from around the district in to talk about things all on through the night. Mostly old men. There was Manall and Paddy Can and only Beggin and a whole crowd of them, you know. And they'd all be sitting there. And they'd be talking. And why I say the conversation was good was because it was, for a number of reasons. For a start, they listened. If one of them was talking or telling a story or relating about relatives in America or some such thing that happened or might happen, everybody listened. And then someone else would say something, or they'd remind someone, or they'd rise another part of conversation, maybe one they'd left off weeks ago. And because they listened, they knew a lot. They had been listening to people all their lives, and they listened very carefully, and they knew and understood the most important thing about them. And it wasn't the history of the county they were in, and it wasn't anything much, but the people. They knew a lot about the people around there. They were a great judge of humanity. Although they did pass judgment too, but they passed it without great approbation. They understood the frailties of human nature as much as anyone. And so when someone was praised, they were praised, and if they weren't, they were not. And sometimes, the less said, the soonest mended. Ask me no questions, tell me no lies. Some parts of the world were walled off as personal and private, not to be asked about. But all about their county and their world, and all the houses between there and Slay, between there and Fymel town, all the people in Clonus, all the relatives of every house that was there, and the ones that did well and the ones that run away to America. They knew everything. And they were wise, they were old, and they used to sit there paring off this Clark's plug tobacco, and sticking it in these pipes and smoking away, and the fire would be blazing. And my grandmother was in charge of the whole shebeen because it was her kitchen. And she used to sit there crocheting. It was a beautiful lace that the French brought to Fermanagh in the 1860s. There was Carrick-Macross lace, but Fermanagh lace was beautiful. She used to make wee rosettes and shamrocks dance up out of this doily or whatever. And she'd be crocheting away, the hook would be flying and listening, and every now and again she would join the conversation. She was a tea merchant, my grandmother. You see, attached to that house, where she reared 6 or 7 or 8 sons and daughters, was a wee store. And the people used to come to that store with their donkeys and the creels on the back of them and on bicycles, all down to the store to buy a bit of paraffin and sell a few eggs and buy some tea and some sugar. That was the main thing, the tea and the sugar. So they lived on that, sometimes bread and sometimes jam, and lots of potatoes. They grew their own, suppose, round there. And they'd go into the store, and they'd ask for a pound of the tea. And upstairs, and I used to be a small boy, wandering around looking at all the labels and these big tea chests. Tea in chests is the most amazing, amazing stuff. There's a big chest full of tea leaves, with silver foil all round it. And my grandmother's tea, as I could read the labels, was a mixture of Darjeeling and Nilgiri, which are beautiful fine-cut North Indian teas from India. And to add a bit of body, because these are light teas, Nilgiri and Darjeeling. Beautiful flavour, taste and smell, but not great for the strength of it. So to put a bit of strength into it, she used to add broken orange pekoe from Ceylon, the finest broken orange pekoe. Wonderful tea. Now, this tea was light in colour when you put the pekoe and the Nilgiri and the Darjeeling in there. Sometimes she had a Sam tea, but there's some all up that corner of India. And she'd put in some Chinese gunpowder tea, oolong. Now that turned it as black or as brown as ever you could get, and it stiffened it up. So you get this strong, strong cup of tea that you could stand a spoon in. Or as my father said, you could trot a mouse across it. And that was tea. And she fed them that tea. I often used to think she was having sales sessions there. She'd fill them up with pots of tea all night. Now, where do you think they could buy their tea from? She was addicting them to it. Oh, it was great stuff, that tea. Full of sugar and good, fresh, decent, natural milk from the cow out the back. Nothing could be finer. So my grandmother was a tea merchant. And all the people that come to that kitchen, to that Cayley room there, oh, there was Manall, always a wise man, Manall. God, he was wise. And Paddy Can. Oh, no, Paddy. He's a character, Paddy. I drove his sisters mad one time. I was only about 20, and I had this big motorbike, and I used to rock it up and down between Eshnadarragh and this was about 1968, I think. Eshnadarragh and Roslay at a ferocious speed. It was a good motorbike. Paddy, he seen the opportunity. Oh, he did. He stopped me in the road one day. He says, Donald, he says, if I give you this, will you go a message? I says, well, of course I will, Paddy. So give me a £10 bob note. What are you talking about? No, I've never seen a £10 note in that district. They'd think it was counterfeit. Anyway, give me 10 bob. He says, go ahead, buy us 6 bottles out of Keenan's and leave it under the hedge there on your way back. And I did. And sure, every time Paddy heard that motorcycle light up, he'd be skiting out across that field with a 10-shilling note and stick it under a stone. And I just delivered the business sometime late at night on me way home. Well, the sisters were going mad. They couldn't figure out where he was getting all this beer. And him sitting there in the house looking at them, drinking beer. And them thinking, sure, he hasn't been out of the house for a fortnight, you know. I suppose he told them that the leprechauns give it to them. But anyway, Paddy Can was a character. But all bargain, Jesus, bargain Mulligan. There was a whole crowd of Mulligans, and a great number of them came to New Zealand. Hughie Mulligan, I think, was a brother of his, and we knew the Mulligans well when we lived in Eden Terrace in Auckland in the late 1950s. He had a house up on Auburn Street, and there was Michael Mulligan and Eileen Mulligan. There's a whole crowd of them up there. We knew them well. Our family went up and talked to them. Anyway, bargain. He had 9 sons, I think. One of them said that she fancied my mother and he could have been my father. And I used to think, Jesus, yeah, Jimmy, that could be right. But the Mulligans are a great crowd. And he used to be in the Irish Club in Auckland. Well, they abandoned the father and left him in Ireland. Sure, he was always getting out of them. He had a 3-acre farm. Prospects aren't good for 9 late lads on a 3-acre farm. Not at all. And they took the mother and went to New Zealand. She was treated decent for her. Sure, he never had a cup in the house or any money or anything. And sometime back in 1930, he jilted someone out of a fiver or something, and they called him the Bargain Mulligan after that. And I went round to see him. It wasn't good. He was sitting there in the old cottage with the 3 turfs stacked up on the fire and a glimmer out of it and a bit of a fire. And I know there was a cow and 3 acres of old wet hillside in Roslay. Oh, boy, beyond Drard it was somewhere. It was the back of Eshnadarragh, off to the left there somewhere. It wasn't up the lane. Anyway. I had a talking about New Zealand. He came out to New Zealand later, did Bargain. Oh, no. The boys got him a job in the only job in Auckland that an unemployed man of absolutely hopeless prospects could get. It was in the margarine factory at Abel's in Carlton Gore Road. And what in the hell they did with him in that factory, I do not know, because he'd never seen a day's work in his life. He'd never seen a machine. He'd never seen anything. He just lived around Roslay and, you know, maybe he had a donkey. God knows. But anyway, they fired him, of course. The island lads were good to him, and they probably carried him for a while until they figured he was just lazy. He'd never done anything, you know. Anyway, the boys were all working with some of them for Green and McCahill, so they went to Hughie Green, who was a very decent man. He's dead now, God rest him. Anyway, Hughie offered to hire him all right. Just keep the boys happy, you know. About 8 of them were slaving their guts out for him. Why not? Anyway, so he hired him. And Bargain used to sweep the yard, the big yard that Green had out there in Church Street. And there was bulldozers coming in and 955 diggers going out and transporters and bits of machinery and welding and fixing machines and all sorts going on in the yard. And Hughie used to watch them from the top office, you know. One day he was looking out the window and he fired Bargain. He knew it would break the boy. Well, he knew the boys would understand it. He went out there and Bargain's chatting away. So that's all he'd done in Roslay, was stand round talking to everybody all day. And if he ever went to Clownish, he talked all day. To everybody. Went home. Anyway, he's talking to a fellow on a big transporter, and he's got a big D10 bulldozer on the back of that transporter, going out to somewhere in Mount Eden or the South Road motorway or somewhere important, you know. And Bargain's chatting up the driver. Well, Green went mad, he says. I'm not paying you any money, he says, Mulligan. Nothing I'd miss. And it's not that you do any work for it, he says. But you're howling of a man there, get £20 an hour, and that machine's worth $1,000 an hour. You're standing there costing me $100 a minute. So he sacked him. And he was right. But anyway, Bargain, I think, I'm not sure Bargain wasn't barred from Minnie's. He said, my grandmother, it was a great store. They used to come down, as I said, with their donkeys and the creels. And they used to dig the turf up the top of the hill. There was a big fields of turf, a bog. And the thing about the bog is, people don't know this much, but it's excavated out of a big hole in the ground, and they put it up on the side of the bog hole to dry in the summer. And in the winter it's nice and dry, and they take it home on donkeys or whatever and burn it. But you see, you have excavated a hole, and this is a damp, wet, boggy business, peat. As I always say, what do you call an Irishman that's been dead for 30,000 years? Peat. Anyway, so it fills up with water. And some of them are lazy and dig the paths too close to the bog holes, too close to the path that anybody walks. There's no roads anywhere, not even a boreen or a lane. I used to walk along these paths, and they used to tell ghost stories. 1 or 2 in the morning, they'd start telling about the Cunyan ghost, and there was ghosts everywhere there, and who was scared by them? Oh my God! Anyway, and it scared the bejesus out of one another. And then after begging and a whole crowd of the mulligans would have to walk up that lane, up to the top of the bog and through the bog to the house. And of course, they got home on a moonlit night. They hadn't drinking that much. Minnie might give them a whiskey every now and again, but it was a challenge. It was a challenge going through the bog without falling in a bloody bog hole at 2 in the morning, and no one come to look for you. But as I said, Minnie Mcginnity, she reared 9 sons, and all of them, I think, become millionaires. In Cavan and Longford and over there in Dundalk in County Louth. Frank got the shops. There was 3 shops: a shop in Roslane, a shop in Drard, and a shop at Eshnadarragh. And she was, they all got, they did well. The boys made a fortune smuggling flour in the war and bought pubs in the Free State after it. They were very good business people. She taught people how to do business. She was one of the finest businesswomen I ever seen. Anyway, that is my grandmother.